you look at what animals have been eating for extended periods of time, and that will tell you what they have adapted to. Meat is completely bioavailable. It doesn't need to lock up its nutrients. It's very easy to turn animal tissue into animal tissue and get those nutrients. When you look at biology and you look at evolution, I mean, biology is one of the mutable laws of biology is that of adaptation. When an animal species or a group has stressors to their environment, they either adapt to those stressors or they die out. They're not fit. They're not, the survival of the fittest. They're not able to deal with the environmental changes or the environment that they are in better than other things. Other things are better suited. They thrive better. They fight them out for resources and things like that. So you look at what animals have been eating for extended periods of time, and that will tell you what they have adapted to. And so it also, you don't need to adapt to meat. Meat is safe. Meat is nutritious. It's the most bioavailable food source out there. So it's actually quite difficult to change plant tissue into animal tissue, which is entirely different forms of life. But it's very easy to turn animal tissue into animal tissue and get those nutrients. Plants lock up their nutrients in ways with chemical bonds that are difficult to break, and we don't have the capability to break many of them. This is the idea of bioavailability. Meat is completely bioavailable. It doesn't need to lock up its nutrients. Plants have defense chemicals. They're stationary. They can't run away or fight back like an animal can. And so they have to have other defenses, innate defenses, that they can use to deter animals from eating them, because they're under constant assault by things trying to eat. Everything's under constant assault in nature. Everything is kill or be killed. That's always the way of it. And so that goes for plants as well as animals. So plants is an objective fact. Plants make about, the entire kingdom makes about 1 million different defense chemicals. And so this is to stop other animals, insects, fungus from eating them and preying on them. And so, you can get a conglomeration of facts and evidence all point to one thing. You should eat what your species has been eating for the longest period of time. 2, meat doesn't have anything harmful in it because it doesn't need to, because there are different defenses that animals have. Now, some animals use venoms and poisons and things like that. Those are generally the smaller animals, but the meat itself generally isn't toxic. Maybe, organs or something like that will have some things in there that aren't great for you, like the liver of a puffer fish, the fugu fish. Liver of a polar bear has a toxic level of vitamin A, but that's not a defense chemical. That just has a ton of vitamin A in it, and that will overwhelm your system. But the meat itself, in general, is fine. Plants aren't. So if you haven't evolved to eat a specific plant, that plant is harmful to you. This is something we teach in junior high biology. So I certainly was, which is plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more toxic, so less and less animals can eat them, so they can survive and thrive. And then animals becoming more and more adapted to specific poisons in specific plants, so they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. And this is why, of the 390,000 plants in the world, more being discovered all the time, koalas eat 1, pandas eat 1. The rest of the animals that eat these plants, they eat specific plants. If you mix those plants around, they will all get sick or die. We can eat spinach, but we can't eat eucalyptus. Almost nothing can eat eucalyptus except a koala. But a koala can't eat anything else. They just eat the eucalyptus. We would do bad on eucalyptus. They would do bad on spinach. So that's the idea. So evolutionarily, anthropologically, paleoanthropologically, we have all the best evidence shows that humans have been apex predators for at least 2 million years, and were largely eating meat before that in a sort of gradient fashion. So about 6 to 8 million years ago, our ancestors were herbivores, and then they started eating more and more meat as you go. And then about 2.5 million years ago, when the ice shelf started coming down in the ice ages, that's when certain population of our ancestors, the Homo habilis, they transitioned into apex predators. And they were the ones that were able to survive and thrive, and that's who we were descended from. And then we became the most dominant species on Earth during the ice ages, and likely because of the ice ages, because that forced them into full carnivory. And we became very, very, very adapted to that. And we had to use our intelligence because, we don't have big claws and teeth like a lion. Like, okay, well, you have plenty of fish that don't have teeth at all, and they only eat other fish. You have birds that have beaks, and they either eat plants or they eat meat. And so, and you have gorillas that have big fangs, and they only eat plants. So, just having fangs doesn't mean anything. We're primates. We have primate teeth. We have very similar shaped teeth to other primates, but we have carnivorous adaptations, which is where they're smaller. And we have smaller muscles of mastication because our teeth were getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and jaws were getting smaller and smaller and smaller because we were chewing on softer food. We're eating more meat. We're not chewing on sticks all day like a gorilla. And so a gorilla's head, most of that head is actually the muscles of mastication, the temporalis muscles. And they're very thick. They have this big ridge of bone that goes down the middle, small little brain in there, and then big, muscle over that. So we have these carnivorous adaptations. Our physiology, we look at that, they're carnivorous. Our gut is much, much, much shorter than other primates that eat an herbivorous diet. We have a comparatively long small intestine and a comparatively short large intestine. And that's because we're absorbing the majority of our food and nutrients in the small intestine. It doesn't go to the colon and the cecum like it does in a gorilla or a chimpanzee, where that's where the fiber gets to and breaks down and gets fermented by the bacteria there and turned into actually saturated fat and protein. That's what they turn the fiber into. They don't get glucose from it. We don't get glucose from it. The bacteria eat it, and they produce as a byproduct saturated fats, short chain fatty acids, and then the bacteria die off, and the animal absorbs that as protein. So they eat fiber, but they absorb fat and protein. That's what animals need. That's what we need, and we can't get that from plants. We have gorillas have a cecum. It's a very elongated appendix. Our appendix is about the size of a pinky finger. So that is a vestigial use. We used to be very elongated. Primates are called hind gut digesters. And so when that's very elongated, that's where fiber packs into, and it breaks down into fatty acids and protein. But we've lost that ability because we have not used our cecum in that capacity for millions and millions and millions and millions of years. So there are a number of different reasons. We have pH of our stomach acid is between 1.5 and 2. And that's very, very low. That's in the range that you'd see carnivores, certainly, but also vultures and carrion animals, because we likely had that in our past where we had to sort of scavenge off of what other people killed or what other animals killed. And then eventually we became apex predators and were able to go after the whole animal. But also we didn't have refrigeration up until, a century ago. And so, they had some stuff. They had like ice blocks in the cellar and all that sort of stuff to keep things cool, but no like electric refrigeration until very recently. You have to contend with a high bacterial load because bacteria is going to grow on the meat. So there are many, many, many ways of coming at this to show that humans biologically, biochemically, anthropologically, paleoanthropologically, evolutionarily are carnivores. You look at the simple difference between pre-agricultural humans and post-agricultural humans. It's a dramatic difference. Their height dropped by 4 or 5 inches overnight. This didn't take hundreds of years. It didn't take thousands of years. It was overnight. And their jaws became smaller. Their teeth became crowded. They had poor dentition. They had poor wound healing, shorter femurs, signs of infection like tuberculosis up and down their spine. The brain size, the adult male brain size dropped by 11%. Nearly immediately after agriculture, and it's persisted until today. Adult female brain capacity actually come down by 17% immediately, and has persisted until today. And we see this in real time. We've seen this in different indigenous populations that have had more recent exposure to Western expansion, such as the Native Australians and the Native Americans, certainly like those in the Plains Indians in North America, who were shown to be extremely tall at the time. In the 1800s, when there were only bison, they were shown to be the tallest population of people on Earth at the time. And they are not anymore. They did not persist in that demographic since they lost their food supply. So the Plains Indians are just eating bison and high-fat, meat-based diet, meat-only diet, really. Generally, they did not eat anything else. Some people say, well, they put berries in their pemmican. Actually, they only put berries in their pemmican to sell to Westerners who wanted it a bit sweeter. But what they ate themselves was just the meat and fat. And so there are many, many different ways of looking at this, but you can look at the recent addition of the Native Americans, the Native Australians to an agrarian lifestyle. And you see the health ramifications of them. They have far higher chronic disease rates, obesity rates, diabetes rates, cancer rates, and all the rest than European Americans or European Australians. It's far, far higher disease prevalence in those communities. In fact, I had a patient that just last week who works with the Native Australian populations. And that's part of the culture. They say, when you're in the cities and you're just sort of eating and doing whatever that people do in the cities, and you get sicker and fatter and less healthy, what you do is you don't go to the hospital. You don't go to Western doctors. What you do is you go back out in the bush. You live with your family out in the middle of nowhere. You go back to living a traditional life, eating a traditional way, just hunting and eating meat. And after a few months, they all get better. And then they come back to the cities and get sick again. But that's understood. And so we are seeing a direct cause and effect relationship between eating the wrong things and having serious ramifications from both our development and our health as adults.